Hello and welcome to Being Catholic Media. Glad you have joined us today. Well, today I'm joined by a different guest, and this guy has a YouTube channel just like myself. And he is a passionate Catholic who is very much into spreading the faith and getting the word out there. So, hello, Mark. You're very welcome, Mark McLean there. Thank you for joining me today.
No, it's great to be here, Carol. Thank you
Oh,
for
you have a Marian passion like ourselves. So today we're going to have a chat about the history of Marian apparitions, and you have your own YouTube channel called Prophecy Prepper. So perhaps you can first of all share a little bit about yourself, your own background, which is quite interesting. I know our listeners and viewers are going to be inspired by what you're going to have to share. So perhaps you can start off and share a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'll try and condense it because it's been quite a journey.
It has indeed.
Yes, yes. So I was always brought up cradle Catholic with my parents. Had a good Catholic rooting on both sides of the family. And I was an altar boy, went to mass, all of those things. You know, even the confession every couple of months, it was made sure I was still going there as well. And to me, it was like from practicing the faith to living the faith. And there's a bit of change that came one day after college. Just like any other normal day after a year or so of studies, I just decided to kill time rather than window shop waiting for the one bus that came every hour. I had a little bit of time to spare, so instead I went into the church, into the chapel. It was St. Patrick's in Coatbridge.
Oh,
And
mhm.
yeah, to my surprise, the adoration was on at the back, a little day chapel, maybe a dozen seats, and says a few prayers and left. And the next day, I decided, oh, I'm going to do that again. And cutting it very short, basically every day it was like, I'm looking forward to going back in. And then I started doing the rosary. I remembered how to do the rosary, how to pray, but I could never remember the mysteries or the big prayers at the
Yes.
end, like the Hail, Holy
Yes.
Queen.
And
And
how
then
old were you then, Mark? How old were you?
I was about 19 then at this point at college, roughly. And I remember buying a rosary bead set. I don't know what inspired me looking back when I was a young boy at 7. I got a rosary set at the back of Mass at the stall and I never used it. And here I am at 19 thinking I'm going to have to look out where that might be. And I felt as if I just knew where to find it after all those years. And
Uh-huh.
true enough, I found it within a few minutes of getting into this big cupboard. Printed off the prayers of the rosary, and there I am, adoration after college, paper in one hand, rosary in the other. And I'm always sitting under the statue of Our Lady of Fatima in that little day chapel. And after 6 weeks, that 15 minutes of killing time for the bus increased every day to the point it was like 2 to 3 hours. I couldn't get
Wow.
enough of it. It was one rosary, then another rosary. As if I leave now, I'll get the bus, but if I miss it, I'll have to stay for another hour anyway. And knowing that at the time I finished the rosary, right, I've got 45 minutes wait now, I may as well do another. So it just pushed myself that little bit more. And this is where the joy became more. This is
Hmm.
looking back, it was like I could speak to him personally without realizing I was doing it. And then it was the sorrowful mysteries, especially, that became very vivid. And when I was when I was meditating, it became the feelings of why he done it for me. It was
Yeah.
taking in the thought of what the pain must have been. It became very personal. But then after 6 weeks, I'm thinking, I'm not praying right here. I'm doing this wrong. I'm wasting my time. And of course, I've heard nothing about, the devil or spiritual warfare and all these temptations and how he might get into your mind. But looking back on it, I've no doubt that's exactly what it was. And one day I was over the chair like this, praying away, losing myself to my surroundings as normal at this point, and I had a little tap in the shoulder, and I jumped with fright because I thought I was the only one there. And this little lady gave me a prayer card of Padre Pio, his intercession, and I was like, "Thank you very much." And that was her leaving, so I never
Yes.
no idea anyone was there because I'm used to having me and Jesus quite a lot on our own during these afternoons. So another couple of days passed at the point it was taking away that peace and that flowing of the peace and the prayer. And I looked down and remember that card was there. And I think at the time I still had more confidence in Padre Pio than I did in Jesus because he's there in the photographs. You read about the miracles. My dad told me many stories of Padre Pio growing up
Hmm.
as he had his own
Hmm.
great devotion to him. So the way I put it was cradle Catholic. I don't expect any signs or wonders or anything, but I says it to the point where I'm fed up feeling this way now. Either you show me that you're happy, or I'm going to stop. So I
Mm-hmm.
twisted it the way I was thinking. So I said that prayer. I asked Padre Pio's intercession with a little card the lady had given me. And the way when I finished and looked up, it was as if the statue of Our Lady of Fatima, her face looked quite like as if she was crying, like wet. But it wasn't just that, it was the feeling inside at the stomach. And do you know that way if you get down a roller coaster or down the hill fast in a car, you can feel a build up, it takes your breath. That was kind of building up, and I quickly realised it was the light showing off Our Lady. You know, you're thinking, I knew it was the light on the material of the statue, but and I knew something was in my stomach, and I'm like, what is this? And it's as if my head just get turned for me, bullseye line with the Eucharist and the monstrance, and that feeling exploded everywhere. It knocked me
Wow.
back on my back against the chair because I was on my knees praying at this point. And it was just a feeling of confirmation that he was happy. It was a feeling of great peace and great joy. And I stayed
Mm.
for another 5 minutes thanking him. I mean, I never had any signs or any apparitions. It was just whatever was going on in there, as if those 6 weeks of praying, I never knew, like, pray for a reason, pray for other people. Never remembered
Mhm.
anything of, the gifts of the Holy Spirit. Never heard of
Yeah.
charismatic renewal. Never
Yeah.
heard of Marian apparition sites currently in place, which we'll cover. None of this was there. This was just me secretly looking about, make sure no one saw me going into chapel. Why was I intimidated if someone saw me going in? But yeah,
Hmm.
when I was in there, it was he and I those 6 weeks. It was 2 hours a day at this point, and this prayer as if it got an answer. And on the way home, I had to keep my head down, like to stop myself from laughing. It was just a great sense of joy, and as if it was just enough for me to know inside, internally, that he was happy. And then things started happening quicker from there. This is the point where I've changed that barrier from practicing to now beginning to live it. It's personal, it's intimate, it's
Mm.
real. He's alive.
Mm.
And providentially, God's providence, my dad's cleaning out the wardrobe one night during this time period, and there was a little prayer, a little book with Jesus's face. Will you help me? And Divine Mercy. What's this about? I says, "Can I read that?" Yeah, take it. I don't know how he must have felt saying, "Yeah, take it." You
Mm.
know. Um, so when I read the Divine Mercy, this is another overwhelming experience to the point where any hypochondria, any worry about death, his words were so clear and so intimate that it just blew me away. And then, of course, it was a rosary, then a Divine Mercy chaplet, back and forth for the continuing weeks after college in the
Oh my
chapel.
goodness.
Then I met a couple of, and then he had the Medjugorje video as well. I was like, what's that? And he told me what it was. He's had it for years, never bothered with it. So I watched that video. And because I'm praying in this chapel every day before the Blessed Sacrament, and it's Our Lady's statue, Our Lady of Fatima,
Mm.
I knew my gran had the video when I was younger, and every Saturday it was always at my gran's, my dad's mum, all my cousins, aunts. This was the gathering every Saturday, very close-knit Catholic family. And
Mm.
every now and again we would be taking our hourly walk up to Carfin Grotto and things like that. It was very much there. That was our local area. So I says to my gran here at 19 now, and all this experience happening, I'm keeping it to myself, no one knows. And I says, do you still have that movie we used to watch as children, the Fatima, Miracle of Fatima movie back in the 1950s, the Technicolor one? And yeah, I think so. She ended up, she had 3 copies of it somewhere, and I got one. So I would finish college, go in for the 2 hours or so of praying rosaries and divine mercies. I go home and I watched this video once in my room, and especially when it came to the miracle, it just blew my mind. And I'm like, if only she could appear like that now, I would be there. There was a
Hmm.
longing for that experience. And that's when, putting it in order, that's when round about the time I saw that video about Medjugorje, it was just lying there for years in the house, unknown to me. So I
Yeah.
watched that. I spoke to a man about it in the parish. He says, "Oh, your man over there's just back from Medjugorje." So again, this providence, it all seems to come at one to the other. This man became a good friend. His name's Mark as well. He introduced me to a Medjugorje prayer group, Father Dominic Towie at the
Oh,
time,
yes.
over in High Blantyre.
He's a powerhouse father. Yeah.
Yeah. I went to
Our
the
house. Yeah.
prayer group every week and the monthly Medjugorje evening, which was mass, adoration, all that, and just the spirit, the enthusiasm amongst all these people. And of course, I start reading into Medjugorje, and straight away I connect it to Fatima.
Yeah,
Then you
yeah.
start reading the quotes, "What I began in Fatima, I will finish here. My
Mm.
heart will triumph." So
Mm.
massive statement, and the natural inclination started looking in because this is real, this is now. And this is what I was taking from it. But he also introduced me, Mark. He says, we're going up weekend up to the Highlands. I've never been that far north before. It was Dalmally at Craig Lodge.
Mm.
Blew my mind away. And at this
Mm.
point, I was praying to get to uni. But as soon as I found out this place, I was already accepted at uni. So I see if I just knew about it before, I would have done the gap year. I wanted to join it.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I've living like Padre Pio for a year in this place in the Highlands. You're offering it all up and getting on with it. So I did a couple of come and sees. Depending what you want to know, I did have quite a unique spiritual experience. A couple of things there, um, and I went back and forth on a few retreats. But eventually, I left uni after a couple of years into it. I was fed up with it all. Wasn't working that way, and I decided to take a year out and went to Craig Lodge.
Yeah.
Now,
So you went to university. Did you not feel maybe that you had a call on your life? Because obviously Grace had, since you were 19 years of age, the Lord obviously spoke to you in a wonderful way. And did that not inspire you maybe to consider the priesthood or that type of life? I mean, what did you go to study in university?
yeah, well, I was back at college just to up the chemistry scores through the biomedical science in order to go to
Sorry, there's my
university
cat.
and study
Yeah, yeah,
dietetics and human nutrition. I'm
yeah.
not much of a role model for it these days, but I was very much a gym fanatic and
All
taking
right.
back then.
Yeah.
And again, at university, we'd be sitting in this lecture hall. We're seeing the videos as if it's a camera inside the body, cellular processes, DNA, how the body fights everything, including the common cold. And I'm just like, how can no one believe in God when you
And you're
see
seeing
this?
all this.
It
Yeah.
was just the time of it
Yeah,
just
yeah,
it was so clear. It was all
yeah.
over. But I think I was a fish out of water, going into the big city, the dog eat dog world. I'm getting all this time of peace and prayer, then I'm getting into the hustle and bustle, and it just was all over. And I think that's why Craig Lodge helped in a way to take that time away, be still, the structure of prayer life, the retreats every weekend in the Highlands with God's beautiful scenery,
Hmm.
and that was all
Because
there.
you really did have a love affair with God, didn't you?
Yeah, I would say so. And
Because
yeah.
most people, when they're 19 years of age, have no interest in entering a church. They're pulled away to what the world offers them. But you were drawn very early on to what the Catholic Church had to offer and God Himself.
Yeah, well, I think it's thanks to having the parents growing up in the
Yeah,
faith to
yeah,
keep the foundation. I never had the teenage rebellious years or anything. I wouldn't say I was the perfect Catholic by any stretch, though. It was just
yeah.
that practice at the weekend and all the rest of it. But to answer your question about think of priesthood, it never once entered my mind until those few weeks of adoration, the privacy and secrecy of just me going in there. And of course, the witness of Padre Pio, that experience I had, I did start looking online, looking at the Capuchins in Britain, looking at the friars, but I never
Mm.
really learnt much about it again until I was at Craig Lodge because many different priests and religious would come there as well, either to give retreats or be part of them. So I ended up speaking to a Jesuit. I spoke to the friars of the Renewal that I've built up a great relationship with them. And I did a couple of come and see experiences, a week here and a week there with them. But I was always attracted to this point at the monasticism, the monks, the community life. And apart from the friars, which I liked, on my own time after leaving Craig Lodge, I also did a week with the Carthusians at Parkminster after watching their DVD, Integrate Science. Loved it. I watched
Goodness
it about four
me,
times.
you're having a ball,
But
aye.
3 hours of silence. It was great. But you know,
Aye.
I loved everything about it. And out of all the come and sees, which have their own unique characteristics, I can't remember the Latin, but the motto with the Carthusians was never reformed because never deformed. They're the only
Mm,
order in the entire church history that have never needed any sort of reform for their original setup. I think it was back at the
yes.
900s or something, 9th century or something, if I remember correct. But I knew I was in the company of mystics with that community. It was phenomenal stuff.
So
Phenomenal.
you've really had, a wide range of experience of the Catholic faith and, the orders that were placed in front of you. So moving, I guess, kind of moving forward and to where you are now, and what happened from that period in your life to where you are now, if you could share about that jump, because it is
Yeah,
a big
so
jump.
yeah, and
Stay
so getting all
tuned,
that.
listeners.
What's that?
Stay tuned. It gets quite interesting. Aye.
Yeah, so I couldn't do the cut off at that point. At this point, I'm probably about 21, 22, and this has been the journey. And I felt sad at night. I felt almost like I'm cut off from family. I'm cut off from the world. You're at that point, you really are giving away everything which is required. And I
Mm,
think if I pursued it out, listen to the many I've spoken throughout, it's the same experience, but eventually the reward is greater. And for me, I had all these wonderful ideas, especially after pilgrimages to Medjugorje. I've been to Fatima and Lourdes. I even went to Garabandal a couple of years ago. But the idea was could do all these great things in the parish that's missing, like all this adoration. Look at what it did to me. Look at the programme in Medjugorje, look at the confessional, look at the healing services, look at all these pilgrimages. I could do all this as a diocesan priest, but the
mm,
diocesan priesthood was never on my heart, to be honest. But eventually, after these few years and the experiences elsewhere, I was like, I could still be close to home. I could still, to me, it was a process of discerning this might be it. But they say if you want to let God laugh, tell him your plans.
mm-hmm.
And one of the
Very
best
true.
books, yeah, one of the best books that's ever accompanied me on that journey was The Imitation of Christ by Thomas A. Kempis. And I
Mhm.
always remember before heading off to Rome, it says, remember, even good intentions can have its roots in self-pride. And I'm like, is it me it's wanting this more than it's going to be
Mhm,
God? But it's been a
mhm,
few
mhm.
years. I've gave up uni. I could have pursued a wonderful marriage with a wonderful woman if it went that way, all the rest of it. But I had to go and get the answer. But I mean, Rome's a story in itself, but it was tough. It took away that spirit, took away the zeal. I've not got a great deal to say about the experience in seminary, as most of the guys I keep in touch with who also left. It's just a real shame. And like I say, that's a subject in its own. And
Yes.
when I left
Yeah.
seminary, I did persevere for a few years. I left in 2014, halfway through fourth year, and
Oh, you stuck it out for four
I
years,
felt as if
Mark.
I
That
had to
was.
because at this point it's like, am I meant to be or not? It's been a few years, all this. So I gave it a shot and all the rest of it, but the zeal, the fire, everything just get took away piece by piece with the seminary experience and everything else. And when I left, I was there 2010. I met Pope Benedict at Bella Houston, shook his hand, which is a great claim to fame, just before
Mhm.
going to Rome.
Yeah.
I was there for Pope Francis coming out on the balcony, all that. But I left in February 2014. And when I was back home, I was quite bitter. I was quite angry. Then it was a case of what's meant to happen and all the rest of it. And
Mhm.
other things happened personally in the family and myself. It became harder again. And for the preceding few years, I had no care of anything. I was just so entangled to let go. But one of the first things I did not long after coming back was set up Marian Apparitions on Facebook. It's
Mhm.
a group page that's organically grew now to nearly 18,000
Mhm.
people. And the reason I did that is because the last 6 months or so in seminary, the only cut off to the world I had in the sense of calm and peace and privacy was in my own room and on the laptop watching YouTube, and then I came across all these channels, and I always was the one for the great outdoors. I always loved the army. I was in the army cadets as a teenager,
Mhm.
living off the land, how to survive, camping, bushcraft, all this. But then these preppers were doing all this, but the reason they were doing it is in case something was going to happen, they
Yeah.
could survive. They were prepared. And the more I was listening to them, I'm like, well, all these years, mentally at least and spiritually, is I'm preparing as best as I can, not just to meet God at any minute whenever He may call me back, but at this point I'm reading in Fatima, Garabandal, Akita Japan apparitions, and of course Medjugorje. And for me, those four are the main ones of what's happening now in the world. To me, it's as obvious
Yeah.
as ever. So I set up Prophecy Prepper, as the name suggested, as to why. It grew arms and legs into the outdoors more than it did with the prophecies and the faith, which now relaunching it just this year is very much going to be focused on the Catholic faith and not just all about preparation with the prophecies, although I do believe undoubtedly that we're going to see a lot revealed very soon, the way the
Yeah.
world's. So
Yeah.
the Marian Apparitions Facebook group set up soon as I was back home, and also Prophecy Prepper on YouTube, which I've
Hmm.
came back and forth with. But just in the last 2 years, I mean, remember between 2014 up until 2020, I was not in the best place faith-wise. But as my spiritual director was always saying, it's all part of the journey. It's all part of the journey. No matter what was said, it never brought consolation. If anything, people were trying to help with those words of encouragement. It was
Hmm.
actually more of an anger that came within
Hmm.
me. I was like, I cannot stand it. But then lockdown happened.
Hmm.
And to me, it's like, Mark, come on. You've not start looking at how long we're talking here. 6 years between 2014 and 2020. You're not going to mass. First time in my life, I stopped going to mass was after leaving seminary.
Hmm.
Not praying, not going to retreats, not doing anything.
Hmm.
And look at the obviousness of the signs of the times, and how it was falling in time with Our Lady stopping appearing to Mariana on the second of the month. At the same time, the churches were closing.
Yeah.
I was on Easter Sunday 2020, and I wasn't looking for it, but a recommendation on the video come up of Anne Catherine Emmerich and her
Yes.
prophecies. Now,
Hmm.
she spoke about a compromise. That was her key word, a compromise in the church, like it was splitting due to a decision that was made, a compromise of the clergy.
Hmm.
The churches were closed, and then it goes on different months. But you know, that was April 12th, 1820. And I'm reading this in April 12th, 2020.
Hmm.
Exactly 200 years to the day, the churches are closed. There's no Blessed Sacrament. There's no Mass. There's no great supernatural grace coming through those sacraments to the world. And I'm looking out the window. From my view, I'm seeing the parish up the hill. I always sat on my couch looking up there if I had to say a prayer. But I see the Easter Bunny rolling about, giving out free Cadbury eggs, mini eggs,
Hmm. Hmm.
whatever else, but there's no Blessed Sacrament, and it's
Yeah.
200 years to the day of that.
Welcome.
So
Yeah.
I'm like, come on, Mark. You see Medjugorje stuff, you know about this, like the secrets, you know about the messages. You see Fatima, you see Garabandal, you see those prophecies as
Hmm.
well.
Hmm.
And now we're living in it. So I'm kind of like trying to get this back because the obvious one thing I couldn't shake for these hard years,
Yeah.
the knowledge of the Marian apparitions, and we've got clear indicators pointing to now rather than 50 years' time or 100 years' time. We
Yeah.
have clear indicators for now. You know what the secrets is to be revealed by the visionaries or the priest of their choosing.
Mm.
Gareth Dahl spoke about four popes after John the 23rd, and then we're into a new era.
Yes.
Those four popes came at the death of Benedict. So
Yeah.
that's four popes since John the 23rd. You had Pope Paul VI, John Paul, who was prophesied as the Pope of a short reign. Then we have John Paul II, and then we have Benedict, that coincidentally came at the time of the two popes prophesied by Anne Catherine Emmerich, and the timely but sad death of Pope Benedict on New Year's Eve,
Hmm.
brought in 2023 by the next
Hmm.
day, which is also the 50th
Incredible.
anniversary of heat apparitions.
It's incredible. Yeah.
It's also convenient at the end of the list of St. Malachi's list of popes, if you want to put a little bit more on it. There's so many things, and I think that's, for me, understanding through my place of work and the job that I've done, again, through the management course a few years ago, I'm used to, on the one hand, the spiritual stuff of
Yeah.
discernment, of examination of conscience and all this,
Mhm.
but on the other hand, in the place of work, doing like the Myers-Briggs test, a few other psychological
Yeah.
tests,
Yeah. Yeah.
I came out as analytical
Yeah.
blue.
You were
It was.
saying that you've got a great
I see,
analytical
no,
mind.
I'm quite analytical. I would be a
Yeah.
great data analyst, to says,
Yeah.
if I
Yeah.
ever
Yeah.
got into it, but I have no idea what it would be. But I see the story and the numbers, and the jobs help me see that clearer. So to me, I just see those parts. And the point of Prophecy Prepper when I started doing the videos was bringing it together. see
Mm-hmm.
the clear message, see how they're not separate. It's the
Mm-hmm.
same plan, it's the same preparation she's been leading us to all along, and
Mm-hmm.
that's where we will see that fulfillment, I
Yeah.
believe, in our lifetime.
Yeah.
And
You said in one of your, I was just looking at some of your content on your channel, and you were saying that Fatima is really the cornerstone of the Marian apparitions.
yeah.
Perhaps you can, you know, in terms of what your opinion, your view on that is, share more with us.
Yeah, well, it's the century that's brought us in two world wars. It's the century it brought us in communism. It was the century it brought in legalized abortion. It was the century it brought in a whole load of stuff that just sees Satan writing all over it. He's there.
Mm-hmm.
But just going back a little bit before Fatima, you had the vision of, or the mystical experience of Pope Leo the 13th,
Yes. Yeah.
1884, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Now, his mystical experience, like I say with analytics, his experience of where God granted Satan extra time to test humanity in the church, that mystical experience was on October 13th.
Yeah.
A few years later, in 1917, the Fatima Miracle was October 13th. Decades later, in Akita, Japan, the big prophecy of cardinals against cardinals, bishops against bishops was October 13th. Then,
Mm-hmm.
of course, when you look at the third secret of Fatima, May 13th was her first apparition. John Paul II was shot on May 13th in 81. And a few weeks later in 1981, there's reports that she's now appearing in Medjugorje. So there's a lot going on there with that. But
Mm-hmm.
to me, she even says back in Quito, Ecuador, Our Lady of Good Success is what her title. The focus would be in just after the middle of the 20th century, speaking a
Mm-hmm.
lot about Freemasonry, the Masonic sects. They would focus on the children and the youth,
Yeah.
corrupting the morals, the eruption of passions. Well, we call that the swinging 60s now, don't we, when we look back on it? And Catherine Emmerich, you read hers, focused on the middle of the 20th century.
Mm-hmm.
So there's many things pointing to then as if that was when the last part was unleashed
Yeah.
with hell. And you just need to look around the world at what it is. But Fatima was the main thing about Russia spreading its errors,
Mm-hmm.
communism. And the way I always try to explain it to someone, for my understanding, is if anyone ever watched the movie about John Paul II, it was called Carol, the man who became Pope. Carol with a K. Great
Yeah.
movie. And he's running from the Nazis in one of the scenes. His friend, I mean, what the man suffered. We've seen his friends, the Jewish friends, and all that killed in World War II, the Nazis, everything. He's running from them one day, and the man takes him in the house. He gives him a book in St. John of the Cross, and he says, "Oh, don't worry about the Nazis. We'll defeat them by love." He says, "How can you say that when they're
Yes.
outside your door
Yeah.
with machine guns?" He
Yeah.
says, "Because evil will devour itself, but if we don't defeat it by love, it'll come back with a new mask."
So profound, eh?
To me,
So
that's what
profound.
communism is. It's not Russia invading Ukraine, it's trying to spread communism.
Yeah.
West is probably more communistic than Russia right now when you look in behind the mask of today and see it's the same evil, the same principles.
Mm-hmm.
And you're getting things where it's saying it's the state that's going to raise the children. Well, how are they going to raise the children? The education system.
Education system, yeah.
You listen to the people in the locals that lived through communism,
Mm-hmm.
even before the apparitions began in Medjugorje. They burned the books in faith, they burned the books in their own history of the country and all that. And this is the communist stuff that you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays, they're not burning our books, it's drip feeding, drip feeding, drip feeding. And we're becoming so desensitized that we're allowing it. And as that old saying is, maybe I make it more like say rather than men, I'll say people, but all it takes is for good people to sit back and do nothing
Do nothing,
for
yes.
evil to prevail. And I think we became very much of a timid church,
Mm-hmm.
especially church leaders to an extent. And I know that paints a big brush overall, and I know some are very heroic and courageous. But for me, it's few pickings in between, in my own personal experience, to find them.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. In Our Lady's message, though, our last message, she says that we're living in a time of grace, you know. So I think we really need to focus on that. Because, like you say, over the last 100 years or so, she has never been more evident than she has been. So she's not coming here because things are wonderful, you know, she's coming here because they're not. And yet, you know, we're promised, you know, an era of grace is coming our way, an era of peace. So it's a fascinating time in history to be alive in, don't you think? And I'm sure, like you say, the experiences that you have had coming from the background you've had, going through seminary, which was, I'm sure, an experience to say the least, to where you are now. I mean, so in terms of the timeline, Mark, in your opinion, where do you think we sit right now? In terms of the plan of heaven, you know, there are many, schools of thought on this right now, but Our Lady's Immaculate Heart will triumph, etc. But in your own point of view, where do you think we're sitting?
I think we're at the point where the devil's ran out of time to do all the damage he can. And even if it's today or yesterday that his time was over, the aftermath of the effects already in place still need to play out.
Yes.
Um, I believe that we're getting prepared not just for the doom and gloom. It's going to be easier on us as the faithful. That's what people forget. Even what we experience is the same as non-believers. It's going to be easier on us than it is with them because we are spiritually prepared, we're mentally prepared, we see God in it all, and we're there with God. That's the difference. So
Mm-hmm.
that takes away the fear, or it should take away the
Mm-hmm.
fear when you've got that
Mm-hmm.
intimate, loving relationship with God.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
if it's the case, whatever he's going to do, is like, I'm here, I'm signing up,
Bring it on.
I'm
Bring
on the
it
Blue
on.
Army. So I
Yes.
hear about it. But this is leading us to the time of the triumph. Now,
Mm.
what is the triumph? The triumph to me is, in a surprise way, when the Medjugorje documentary came out, The Triumph, it wasn't about telling us of this great time in the world. It's not about this. It was the changing of the hearts of the people,
Mm.
the fruits, but the hearts. See, it's more than just saying, Hail Mary, fill grace, the Lord is with you.
Yes.
It's not
Yes.
that. It's the case of where you can actually tune in and know that God is inside you, just like He is omnipotent in the whole universe, the whole creation. He's more intimate than you and every individual. And it's that God of love. Now, I think with the preparation, when you look at the 10 secrets of Medjugorje,
Mm-hmm.
I see Garabandal and all that coinciding with it, because between Garabandal in the 60s and Medjugorje now, they speak about a great illumination of conscience.
Yes.
Everyone's going to see themselves before God. He's going to intervene at the point things are ready to get so bad we're going to annihilate ourselves. That's the evil forces. That's the way you can see things building up, everything going on in the world just now. He's going to intervene as a great act of mercy and
Mm-hmm.
a great act of love as a last chance. Turn back to me.
Mm-hmm.
Because look where you're going without me.
Mm-hmm.
Come back to me, and it's going to correct their conscience, because everyone thinks he can do what they want. They love God, God loves me, but they forget the whole point of the sin. So he's going to correct the conscience and understand this is what sin is. This is how much it damages you and
Yeah.
others. This is what it's like before me. And
Yeah.
that's going to make us truly repent in a loving way of knowing the love of God. People will be running to the confessionals, they'll be running to the church. And
I
this
hope
is the
so.
beginning of the preparation of the triumph, because the way Medjugorje describes the first couple of secrets is the world needs to get a shaking up,
Mm.
needs to be shaken up, and that to me coincides with the illumination of conscience. They were
Mm-hmm.
allowed to reveal the third secret of Medjugorje, which is a permanent, indestructible sign,
Mm-hmm.
everyone in the world to see, and it will bring more conversions than ever. Some will still refuse, believe it or not, as she says, but more than ever, it's the same exact description of the permanent sign to be left in Garabandal
Yes.
after the warning and the miracle itself there. So I believe you're going, and remember, we're not going to guess the times. Marianne has made it clear in her book that she's chosen Father Peter, who I believe is late 70s now. When Our Lady tells them it's time for the secret, I don't know if it's going to be 1, 2 to 10 all at one go, if it's years apart, but when the secret, whatever one it is to be revealed, they'll be fasting for 7 days and nights. Then Father Peter reveals it to the world, and 3 days later it occurs.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to be walking along, and again, the more they're telling us this is going to happen, and then it does, then another, then it does, it's
Yeah.
going to give more people believe in the fact that they're onto something here.
Yes. Yes.
Or they gave themselves enough rope to hang themselves, and none of
Mm-hmm.
it's true, but we're going
Mm-hmm.
to find out. Now, if he's in his late 70s, and this is what's in our book, if my memory's serving me correctly, is if God spares me to the statistical age of 70s or 80s, then I'm going to see it. Everyone at the same age or generation with that in mind of the age has every chance to see it if they've to live
Mm-hmm.
to that time.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for me, it's going to, and I'm taking in other ones like Marino Restrepo, who I've met
Yeah.
several times, and he's a
Yeah.
humble man and all he does. I believe there's going to be something like a Eucharistic reign when these things start to play. There's still
Yeah.
going to be a lot of bad coming because remember, there are some goods and bads. It's grace, it's chastisement dependent, and whatever that timeline is, I don't know. But the triumph in that first preparation, that still the act of mercy, as Jesus says, I'll still come this is the time of divine mercy before I come as the just judge. And even in the diary of divine mercy, he still speaks a lot about chastisements and all the other things.
He
But
does
we're at
indeed.
a time of
Yeah.
mercy. So,
Yes.
mercy and justice is a topic of divine mercy and justice, how it's together when you think they're poles apart. That's another thing in itself, theologically looking at it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's going to be a fresh outpouring of the Holy Spirit.
Mm-hmm.
Garabandal say at that point of the miracle, which occurs within a year after the illumination of conscience, it's going
Mm-hmm.
to be the greatest miracle Jesus has ever performed for people. And then we'll get the miraculous signs to come afterwards in these both locations. And I personally believe they're going to pop up in other different Marian shrines around the world.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would very much be the case. And I just believe that that's going to bring in a new Pentecost. It's going to be worldwide Pentecost for everyone to
Mm-hmm.
repent after such a divine intervention.
A new beginning for us all.
Yeah, definitely. And there's other ones speaking about how all the denominations and faiths will fall into the Catholic Church under Peter, the way Christ had it from the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, you're going to
Mm-hmm.
see the Holy Spirit work that can't be denied.
Yes. And Paul, in terms of your life, how you are now, maybe you want to share a little bit about where you are now, what you're up to. A bit about your channel, of course, if people want to have a look at your stuff that's there, and what you're planning for the future in terms of your ministry.
Yeah, well, to hear it being called ministry is probably like, ooh, maybe.
Well,
Like it's a good place to say it because I think
yes.
it's at the beginning of something now. But when I left seminary in 2014, right up to 2020 with the lockdown, like I say, it's been a roller coaster,
Yeah,
emotionally, spiritually, everything.
can
But
imagine.
I get curious. I was quite indifferent when I went on a website, like a dating website,
Yeah.
a couple of years ago. There, I must know at least five friends from Craig Lodge or the Faith Circles that joined CatholicMatch.com,
Right.
and very happily married, raising their children well in the faith, and their absolute focus and ultimate bond is God and the family life and their marriage. And there was always a wanting. I always felt marriage would be the way growing up. And this is where the balance was hard when I decided to go to seminary. But even after those years afterwards, I was like, I'm on my own. I'm getting used to it. So I was quite indifferent. I says, I'll go in and check it out. I don't know why I did. Probably because there was a good offer on it, £40 for the year or something. So I did it anyway, and I get invited to a couple of friends' house who, again, they found themselves falling in love when they met at Craig Lodge years before. And I'm sitting there saying to them, what's my story? Use of all, everyone, the people's, they're either priests or religious or they've get
Mhm,
married. They're
mhm,
all
mhm.
happy, following their stories, their vacations. Look at my story. It wasn't plain sailing. It wasn't happily ever after with God. It's been like this and
Yes.
down. And 2 weeks later, I started messaging a lovely lady in Birmingham. And again, I'm like, "Well, I'm free this week. I may as well take a drive because I'll just be bored in the house as usual." So I drive all the way down to Birmingham. And as soon as we clocked eyes at each other, we even admit there was a moment of attraction. We had a meal,
Mhm.
we spoke, and we decided, well, let's see where it goes in. Let's be focused seriously. Good Catholic woman, all the rest of it. And after a few months going well, so I'm going to start looking up, see if there's a job down there, because I won't say the employer I'm with, because I like to keep my private life separate and whatever. But the employer did have a job. The only one opening in the whole of the UK was in Coventry. So I says, look, I have no mortgage, no kids. I can go if you want to, if this is serious. She says, absolutely. I'm focused. Are you? I was like, yeah. I thought it
Wow.
was.
Wow.
But this is me coming out the ruckus bit by bit. So I'm in the gym, which was an abandoned church, and I'm sitting there on the bench press and ready to go. And it's the stained glass Jesus in the stained glass, and it's Carpe Diem, seize the day. Well, okay, so I actually just took it with that as a leap of faith. Went applied for the job. A week later, I had the interview. Get told 2 days later I had it. And this point is like December 22nd, and the job starts in January the 8th. So I literally had a quick Christmas, get everything in the back of a big rental van, and I drove down to Coventry. And providentially, she's part of Zion Community, who are based in Coventry. So look, there's a room here to rent, discern your life's relationship and settle in at the job. And so January the 8th last year, I set up in Zion Community, got on with the job. And by April, I proposed to her up in Pluskerton. That's a story itself, how that came about. Because, yeah, I'll leave it. If you want to know, I'll tell you after this little bit. We got engaged in the April, and by October, we were married. And that's when I moved in with her over here at this house.
Mm-hmm.
And I hadn't bothered with the YouTube or anything like that for the last year or two.
Mm-hmm.
But she's saying, change the banners, maybe change a bit of the art on it. And I was deliberate in whether or not to change the name. I kind of feel
Mm-hmm.
as if like, sometimes is it right? But when you see it's preparing for the triumph, the new outlook and everything else, and the content will speak for itself. And yeah, I'm part of Zion Community. And again, I think God was getting me back to basics. It was like going back to Craig Lodge back in 2007 or whenever it was. Here I am. Sometimes I only had the place to myself for a week at a time, because the other two ladies that were living there were always doing retreats left, right, and centre as part of the Zion outreach.
Yeah.
So just me and Jesus again. Back to silence, back to
Back to
prayer.
basics.
Yeah, back to basics. It was like St. Paul, he took me away to the desert and started again working inside here. And growing through Craig Lodge and understanding better the church teaching, John Paul's the second's teaching, like theology of the body,
Yeah.
marriage and family.
Yeah.
We get married on October 22nd, John Paul II's feast day. And it's because she's a RE teacher, she's the head of RE, but down here, that was the first day of the midterm holiday. So it wasn't just because we picked it, it was the first day for the wedding. So we had John Paul II's feast day. We were both very much focused on his teaching with marriage and family. I invited my former spiritual director, Bishop John Keenan, down to do the mass, the wedding, which he did.
Wow.
I first met him at a Theology of the Body retreat at Craig Lodge years before, and she was saying, "Will we get our rings engraved?" I was like, "I'm not thinking." She's thinking of all. I was like, "Yeah, sure, whatever." So I came with the idea as totus tuus, totally yours, which was John Paul's motto. So he became the patron of the marriage very quickly. We've got our own favourite saint. So I just thought that was a nice little thing again. And I gave good testimony in my speech to thanking God for the journey. Because after all those years where it would be annoying me to hear words of encouragement or to try and see it, I see it now.
Yeah.
Sometimes, and that's one thing I've learned. It can be a while. 7 years of hardship. I'm hoping for 7 years of good stuff.
This is it. Before
There's
yeah.
clarity and focus in life now. There's no discernment anymore of vacation or anything like that. And I've never known anything to go on with the flow so easily as it is since meeting Francis, my wife, But I'm part of the Zion community, wherever that may go. I've relaunched YouTube. There's a bit of work in progress for getting it back up and running. And yes, the algorithms got me away because I haven't been busy on it. So yeah, subscribers and watching the videos will help me get out of YouTube jail.
Yeah, and we'll probably do a little bit more together and maybe
I'd love
back
to.
some subjects. So look, what a fascinating story you have to share. And there's more, I'm sure there's lots more to talk about. But again, where God brought you back and you met your most amazing wife and are happy. And that's all we want really, is just to find and to have such a spiritual life, a spiritual wife like that. And like I say, big vote for is the Catholic.com you met her on, was it?
Yeah, Catholic
There
Match.
you go. So anybody who's looking there, never give up. But look, it's great to talk to you. We'll catch up again. Just remind our viewers where they can find more about you, about your YouTube channel and that.
Yeah, so it is called Prophecy Prepper. But the name suggests with the prophecies and preparing for it. The early videos are kind of all over, but the focus in the last year or two, especially now going forward with the relaunch, it's going to be Catholic based in every way, especially for the times we're living in, and hopefully get more people on as well, do interviews, keep the focus on commentaries, Catholicism, the faith of any kinds. I
That's
could
it.
include everything. But yeah, Prophecy Prepper is where to look.
Yeah. Well, Lucas, it's been great talking to you. I'm sure our viewers will be really got a lot out of what you had to say. So until next time, thank you for joining me, and bye bye for now.